Welcome back to Dr. Supercoach YouTube for Pig's Round 10 Captaincy Recommendations. Here we go, hitting double figures and approaching the mid-season buys. Now, Tristan dropped a cherry bomb on Sunday night, giving his owners a monster 186. I had that as my captaincy, and I was obviously very stoked with that. And the crazy thing is that was in what we previously considered a bit of a tough matchup. So look out this week, non-owners. And just closing the loop on the Meek versus TDK versus Cameron battle. Meek tanked me in the last round, and I have to donate 2 lots of $10 to the Dr. Supercoach Cancer Council Fund. It's a bad way to end it for Meeky, but it all goes to a worthy cause, so all good. Now, I just want to celebrate the fact that St Kilda are off Friday night footy. Hell yes. That means we get our Sunday Harry Boyd loop back. And boy, do we need it this week, as Sunday is actually looking like an absolute picnic for our captaincy options this week. I'm going to dub the 18th of May as Super Sexy Supercoach Sunday, because all of my top 5 favourite captain options for the week play on the final day of the round. So if you're coming into Super Sexy Supercoach Sunday morning feeling like your team isn't really performing, just hold on. Those big scores are coming, I'm pretty sure of it. And this is a really important week to discuss my VC strategy. I know a lot of people like to use it on a Thursday or a Friday night, and I won't talk you off that if that's your thing, but my tactic is to try and put the VC on who I think will be the highest scorer in my team. And this week, I do think that will be someone on the Sunday. So I'm likely to not even use my VC until Sunday, and I'm totally okay with that. The only caveat is that you need a working loophole, and you need a safe fallback captaincy option playing after them. And I'll give you an early tip this week. We all have a great fallback C in the last round of the game, so we're all good there. So I'm still going to give you 3 earlier VC options like I normally do, just in case you need something on a Thursday or Friday or even the Saturday. But I just don't think they have the ceiling of the guys on the Sunday. So anyway, let's get stuck into it. Number 3 VC is Tom de Koning. Look, Tom hasn't been in great form lately, but if you really need a player on the Thursday or the Friday night, I don't mind this one. A matchup with Brodie Grundy, who's actually a positive ruck matchup this season. He's recently allowed Briggs, Witts and Cameron to all exceed their season average in the matchup with Grundy, so he's definitely not locking people down. Not only that, but this game is at the SCG, which is a slightly smaller ground than most, and one that we usually see an extra couple of stoppages per game than we do at the bigger venues. Do you remember Grundy's home versus away scoring split last year? Some of that has to come from the SCG being a good scoring ground for ruckman. And TDK visiting town should see a little boost for him here. Look, he's got a 5-round average of 107. That's not that bad, especially when you consider he's had to play Cherry and Rob in the last month. And they're the 2 most restrictive ruckmen in the league. So he actually hasn't been that bad. So this is a fine VC punt on a guy with a high upside if you really need a Thursday or a Friday night captaincy. I think there are better options, but if you need one in those early 2 games, this is your guy. Tom Green is my number 2 VC option. Tom is coming off a 125 last week thanks to 37 disposals and a goal against Geelong. This week, he returns home to NG Stadium to host the Dockers. The Dockers are the 4th easiest matchup for inside midfielders over the last 10 games, so look, they did just tag Dacos. They kept him quiet, but they also gave up 171 to Jack Crisp in that same game, and they gave up a 160 to Jack McRae the week before. So there are points available. I don't really see Tom Green as someone with that type of ceiling. He's not really shown like a 160, 170 type ceiling. Just his disposal efficiency sometimes caps him a bit, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him crack his first 130 for the year this week. I think that's absolutely on the cards. The last 2 times he faced the Dockers in Sydney, he's got scores of 127 and 143. The Thursday, Friday and Saturday matchups, like I said, they don't really produce the juicy matchups like Super Sexy Supercoach Sunday will. But this is one where I think you could see a season high from a gun midfielder here in this game. And then my number 1 VC is Lachie Whitfield. Lachie is the form defender of the year. He's pumping out 118 average on the season, and now the run sees him with a matchup with Freo, with the 5th easiest matchup for both general defenders and designated kickers. So the guys in that back line score well against Freo. They have allowed guys like Keane, Bowie, and Rivers to score very well against them. Having said that, they also have limited Sinclair, Nazaya, Houston, and Josh Dacos in recent weeks. So it does look a bit hit and miss. Like, I'm not necessarily guaranteeing this is going to be a big one, but a VC punt on a guy with 140 plus upside in a pretty favourable matchup, I think it's a really good option. Whitfield has already put out a 145 and a 148 this year, and it's likely this could be another one. Or at least I believe there's another 140 plus coming for Whitfield very soon, and it could be as soon as this week. So if you want to be on the VC train for this one, I don't blame you. I think it's a pretty good option. Now, pod, point of difference captain or vice captain. Bont killed the pod C last week. What happened there? He was on track for a 150 at halftime, and then he barely even scored in the second half. He's made me mad. But it's okay, because the big llama is here to redeem the Bulldogs primos and get the pod C back on track. Tim's last 3 weeks include 100 against Briggs, a giant 166 that sent Sweet back to the Shadow Realm, and an 88 against Gold Coast. And that 88, I'm not even that worried about that. That was against Jared Witts, who is the third most restrictive ruck matchup this season. Witts is limiting ruckmen to 20 points below their normal capacity on average. So if that matchup was just against a normal opponent, like an average run-of-the-mill opponent, English probably gets pretty close to a 110 there. And this week he doesn't just get a matchup with a normal opponent. He gets a matchup with the third easiest ruck of 2025. Todd Goldstein has been taken out of the Austin Powers cryogenic freezer, and he still hasn't worked out what decade he is in. Goldmember has been grooving his way around the footy field, but he's allowed scores of 121, 146, 125, 141, and 145 since he took over those solo ruck. So yes, no ruckman has gone under 120 against Todd this year, and 3 of them have cracked 140. So I really expect Goldie to beat English in the hit-out battle, but I just don't think he's going to be able to keep up with him around the ground. English's strength is to get around the ground, get his marks, get his kicks. He might even chip in with a goal or 3 like he did against Jordan Sweet. So there's a genuine chance we could be looking here at a 4th ruckman joining the 140 club against Goldmember here. Number 6 captain option is Jack Sinclair. I'm actually going to give you 6 captain options this week, as I couldn't bring myself to leave out any of these guys off the videos. I think the matchup's just so good for all of them. So let's start Super Sexy Supercoach Sunday discussion with Jack Sinclair. Well, that was a bit of a tongue twister. Sinclair's been down in recent weeks, but he returned to form with a 124 last week against Carlton, and this week he gets a great matchup with the Eagles. This West Coast team is conceding the 5th most points to attacking defenders and the 3rd most points to designated kickers. Now, the scores against the Eagles for defenders haven't actually been that flattering in recent weeks, but they haven't really played against these power running halfbacks like Sinclair. They've faced the bigger intercepting premiums, more like Vlosten, May, Sicily. They were all a bit down on their scores. But if we look back a few weeks ago, we see some big scores from those elite runners. So we're talking like a 145 from Nick Martin, a 148 from Lockie Whitfield, a 130 from Lockie Ash, and a 136 for Dane Zorko. So these high running, high power, elite kicking guys do score well against the Eagles. So I think this is a really safe 125 at least, with every chance to be bigger if Jack is to roam around the ground free, unaccounted for. Alright, then we go to my number 5 captaincy option, Dane Zorko. So Dane returned to Supercoach form last week with a big 166. And even in this down slump that he still had some good Dream Team scores in there. So that was indicating he was still getting the ball enough, he was just butchering it a bit. He corrected that last week, and he could do so again this week. A matchup with Melbourne, who are actually the 2nd easiest matchup for designated kickers this season, and they're giving up the 5th most marks per game to opposing teams. If you remember that Melbourne versus Geelong game where the 5 Cat players had over 10 marks, including that Zach Guthrie had 17 marks in the game, that was the highest of highs. I don't expect Zorko to have 17 marks in this one, but it does highlight that the Demons are allowing other teams to chip it around the back line, and no one picks harder in defence than Zorko. Returning to the Gabba, where he already has a 136 and a 135 this season, and his last 3 scores against the Demons are 115, 116 and 139. So I think it'll be a great score for Dane this week, and to be honest, having him this far back at number 5 seems really unfair. but it just shows some of the big scores still to come. And I think one of those big scores is going to come from number 4, Jack Macrae. Jack's been a bit of a roller coaster lately with scores of 104, 77, 160 and 79 in his last month, but I've got a strong feeling he's going to be in one of the peaks of the roller coaster this week. A date with the Eagles, who are the easiest midfield matchup in the league. Interestingly enough, there's only been one score over 115 against the Eagles in the last 3 weeks, that being Petrarca's 129, but I don't think that's a real trend. Their opponents in that stretch have been Richmond, Melbourne and Hawthorn. 3 teams without any real top-tier Supercoach midfielders. If we look back a few weeks further, you'll see a 141 from Sam Walsh, a 132 to George Hewitt, and a 113 to Andrew Brayshaw. I think they're more realistic. Plus, I could even take you further back to rounds 1 and 2 and show you a heap of 130s, but I think you remember what the Suns and the Lions scored on the Eagles, so I don't need to do that. Look, Macrae's a contested possession and clearance beast, and I just don't think the Eagles are going to have anyone that's going to be able to beat him to the footy. This is looking like a really safe 130 from a player that most serious Supercoach owners will own. And between him and Harry Boyd, who both play in the last game of Super Sexy Supercoach Sunday, they should allow you to have a VC crack at nearly any player in your team this week, and maybe it should be one of the next 3 players. Number 3 is Max Gawn. Max is still the highest scoring Supercoach player of 2025. He just put up a big score against Lloyd Meek, who certainly isn't an easy matchup. And this week he gets the job against Oscar McInerney. Now Big O is generally considered a restrictive ruck matchup, and I think in general he still is, but the right player can still score against him. Have a listen to his restrictiveness over the last month. He restricted Darcy Cameron to 23 points below his form, but then he allowed Marshall to go 39 points above his form. Then he restricted Witts to 45 below his form, but then he allowed Cherry to go 57 points above his form. So that's a real rollercoaster month for the Big O. He restricted 2 primo ruckmen, and he allowed 2 others to go bonkers. I do think that's good news for Gawn, as it's showing that McInerney isn't restricting everyone, and when you're the form player of the comp, it's hard to slow you down at the best of times. So I love this as a captaincy option on the Sunday. You probably can't VC him, as his game will overlap too much with the last game of the round, unless you want to make a call at half time, but I don't really love doing that. So as your fallback C option, I don't think you can get much better than a red hot Max Gawn. Then number 2, Harry Sheezel. Harry moved back into defence in round 7 and since has scores of 135, 120 and 101. And it is going to get very juicy this week. A matchup with Richmond, who are by far the easiest opponent for designated kickers. So Melbourne are the second easiest team, and the gap between first and second is bigger than the gap between second and 13th. That just indicates that the Tigers are very, very, very easy for designated kickers. Like we're talking about scores of 126 from Ryan Marrick, 142 from Josh Battle, 132 from Bowie in the last 3 weeks. And look, Harry Sheezel is one of the best designated kickers in the league. He's levels above those guys. So I was seriously considering making this my number 1 captain option in a week of gigantic scores. That's how keen I am on this VC shot, or C. But if you don't own my number 1 option, I think you should be looking to Sheezel with your captaincy, absolutely. But my number 1 option is Tristan Cherry, and I don't think that would have been a surprise for many of you. Cherry's leading the charge for Super Sexy Supercoach Sunday. He's coming off a 186 and he now has a 3-round average of 163. Not only that, but he gets a matchup with the second easiest ruck matchup in the league. Remember, Toby Nankervis started the year with 6 out of the first 7 ruckmen to play him turning up, and the only one that didn't was Shrek in his first game back, and we know he's not looking good. Lloyd Meek then ruined the streak, and then the ruck-sharing Flynn/Bailey Williams couldn't restart it. But those guys aren't prime and informed Tristan Cherry. There's levels and difference between them. Only 3 weeks ago, Max Gawn put a 174 on Nank, and we've just seen the kind of score is well within Cherry's wheelhouse as well. I don't think I need to give you many more stats on this one. This is simple. This is a top 2 ruck coming against one of the easiest ruck matchups in the league, and we already have evidence of the other top 2 ruckmen scoring a 174 in this matchup very recently. So, look, just lock it in. Those are my favourite 10 captain options for the week, but always here's a bunch of names that didn't quite make the cut. I think these girls are going to score well. I think you could roll with them for a captain in your draft leagues. John Newcomb, the first game of the round, I think should score well, but I'm not super confident in him at the moment, and it's up in Darwin. Who knows what happens, but the matchup's good. Then we go into Saturday. Finn Callaghan and Lockie Ash, I think, should have good games. I've just talked up Tom Green and Lockie Whitfield, and Callaghan and Ash are, I guess, the 2 to their 1, so I think they should do as well. Connor Rosey, halfbacks have been going really well against Geelong, so I really like that matchup. Tim Taranto, I think, could beat up on North. He's someone that does score well against the poor team, so he's an option. But in that same game, I really like LDU and Jai Simpkin against Richmond. I think they're both going to run amok. Then in the Melbourne-Brisbane game, Melbourne were a really easy midfield matchup at the end of last year and the start of this year, but that's starting to look a bit more restrictive since both Viney and Clary have been used as a tagger in the last month. So it does give me some hesitation, but the guys like Neil, Dunkley, McCluggage all should score well, especially the ones that don't get a tag. So maybe Dunkley and McCluggage are better options. Then the last game of the round, I think there's going to be some huge scores here. I think Ryan Marrick is going to do well again. There was a point there where I was wondering if St Kilda actually weren't that good of a matchup for defenders, but the data's showing that they still are. They're back. So I think Marrick will do well. I've talked up Jack McRae for his matchup, but Jack Steele's also in really good form, so I think you could look at him. Isaiah Wanganeen-Miller is also an option. I've talked about Jack Sinclair, and they're the 1 and 1A to each other's Batman, so he's an option. Rowan Marshall's a really interesting one here because he's been out of form. He's got 3 good scores in a row, but 2 of them I wasn't really convinced in. He kind of, the first 2, he wasn't getting many disposal marks and he was just boosting his score through hitouts. But last week he looked closer to being back. He had a lot of disposal, a lot of marks. So he's a really good option because, look, anyone that plays West Coast Ruckman essentially get a 30-point boost just to their scoring just because they're playing West Coast. That's how easy Flynn and Williams are to score against. So if Marshall's back, and he's playing these guys, this could be a monster 150, but if it's just kind of half-injured, limpy Marshall, he'll probably still score 100, which is enough in draft. So that's my top 10 Supercoach captaincy recommendations. Now, talking again about saving my VC until who I think will be the highest scorer of the round, for me that is undoubtedly Tristan Cherry. He deserves the armband. So my plan will be have the VC on Cherry, the captaincy on Harry Boyd on field. Tom De Koning will sit on the bench with the emergency, and I'll need to do that before the Friday night game. So don't kind of get to Saturday and Sunday and think, oh, time to do my loop now. My VC didn't work, because Tom De Koning will already be locked out. So he needs to go onto the bench now with the emergency. I'm expecting a big 140 plus from Cherry this week, but if he fails, that's fine, because I'm very confident with Jack McRae against the Eagles as my captain to end the round. I also own Jack Sinclair, so I could also go for him. I could VC Lockie Whitfield or even Tom De Koning himself, but if they get a 125, I'll probably be forced to take it, and I think that could be giving up quite a lot of points to Cherry, especially this week. So that's the reason I like to put the VC on who I think will be my highest scorer in my team. I want to give myself a chance at that big score. I don't want to kind of be forced into taking a 125 when I predicted a 150 coming. Anyway, that's me done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, turn your notifications on, and good luck this week.